Hey guys, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 2 preview. I'm still recording on vacation on Switzerland, but of course, here to drop some content for people who have some pressing questions for Game Week 2. I think the biggest question is going to be what to do with Gabriel, and the second question is probably what to do with one of your midfielders, either some of your failed punts in Game Week 1 or even a KDB, for example, and that significant injury and how to react to it. As far as the first question, I think addressing Gabriel, or generally what are the best defenders to go for this week? I think Game Week 2 is a question about whether you have Gabriel. Unfortunately, a lot of people, I understand, weren't able to react to the deadline news. It was really 5 to 10 minutes before the deadline because of work commitments or, of course, real life situations like just geographically where you're situated and being able to react to news in European time. But the issue, of course, as sad as it is that Gabriel, I don't think is as nailed as we previously thought. And we have to just look at the Arsenal situation and how Mikel expressed his opinion on why that change was made. It was a tactical decision, as he confirmed in the post-game press conference. He pretty much said that it was a structure in which he felt like Gabriel didn't really fit in because of what they wanted to do in the midfield. And I think apart from looking at the lineup as just a simple 4-3-3, the idea really is that this is almost like a flexible three-back formation that can move into that sort of box midfield at times. So, for example, someone like Partey, who you'd look at the lineup as a right back, is arguably, for example, the right defensive mid in a structure here, very reminiscent to, for example, Pep's box midfield in that sort of 3-2-2-3 shape. And of course, that sort of suggested that Gabriel isn't fit for purpose, I suppose, for this lineup. You can see, of course, the left center back position was something that Timber had actually occupied before his injury. But then after the injury, the biggest question is, did Gabriel actually come and join the team? And actually, he did not. And he came on later, but was actually a late sub. And I think that was clearly when Arsenal were also switching things up tactically. But it suggests that within the sort of box midfield setup, that Gabriel maybe doesn't actually have a place in the team because Tomiyasu was the direct sub for someone like Urian Timber there, which is very, very interesting. I think actually Gabriel is still worth a transfer out, particularly if you don't have a good defender in place right now. If you have money, the easiest way to actually move out of Gabriel is to simply just go for a Chelsea fullback. I think Chilwell, of course, is the default answer for any defender transferred this week. But if you already have Chilwell in your team, I would still consider going between Reece James or Ruben Dias. The reason why is because ultimately, I don't see the Chelsea double up on the fullback as bad. Chelsea's fixtures are clearly the best of the bunch. And with Ruben Dias, the situation is still a little bit murky in terms of him dealing with the concussion protocols and, of course, the inevitability of rotation within the City team. I thought Reece James looked really good, and it was actually a positive thing that Pochettino pretty much expressed that the Reece James substitution was just due to him actually starting preseason very late due to having an illness, and therefore him actually being tired within the Liverpool game. So nothing actually about any pre-existing injury or him actually feeling any pain. So that was actually really positive news, and I think the go-ahead is clear for James to actually be within our teams at this point in time. If you don't have extra money in the bank, I would simply just consider going for Saliba as well. Out of all the Game Week 2 defenders, I think one of the issues with the landscape right now is that no Game Week 2 defender has a really good game. At the 5.0 price point, you're really looking at Lisandro Martinez and Saliba. And for this reason, I would go for Saliba just because Game Week 2 is so much better. And I'm assuming that you actually have a gap to sort of fill in at this point in time. I wouldn't really consider any of the 5.0 City defenders at this point in time too. We saw, of course, that there's just so much ability to have rotation. And that makes it very, very inflexible for us, for people actually considering City assets. And I think, as I said in my team selection video, Ruben Dias is the only player I really have confidence in terms of being actually nailed within the City team. So that's the issue. And if you want to go further down, and actually Game Week 2 is not an issue for you, but you're, let's say, preparing a move for Game Week 3, I would consider rolling my transfer and just simply keeping Gabriel, hoping that he gets the start versus Crystal Palace, because ultimately, Nottingham Forest are a very different team to Crystal Palace. They sort of play a back five. You could argue maybe Mikel sort of set that way up just based on how he expected Nottingham Forest to defend. Because in the press conference, he was actually talking about how the lineup that Nottingham Forest put out was something that they already expected. So that's actually something that will probably change because Crystal Palace do line up in a back four. And we know, of course, even though they're very defensive, that it's going to be a different shape that maybe Arteta feels Gabriel could actually be well suited for. So that's one thing. If you don't want to roll, though, and you just simply want to maybe go for a 4.5 defender, I think Udogie is probably the only transfer suggestion that I would have at this point in time. He's someone who doesn't have a great game week fixture in Game Week 2, but when we think about United and move ahead of that, the fixtures are really, really good for Game Weeks 3, 4, and 5. So you could actually attack the fixtures really well there. But as I said, it just makes more sense to roll, particularly if Game Week 2 is bad for most of your defenders. And so reasonably, I would say go for Saliba, a Chelsea defender, or Ruben Dias if you want to play it safe and you don't want to double up on the Chelsea defense. As far as the next conundrum really for managers in Game Week 2, I think it's what to do with the midfielders. Some failed punts, did occur, right? Players like Foden, players like Havertz, and even people who actually went for KDB based on the sort of leak that we got at the deadline too. I think if you have KDB, you clearly have to exercise the transfer at this point in time. I think the only midfielder that I really love who has a good Game Week 2 fixture is Diaby. It's a huge downgrade, but of course, you can just see it as an opportunity to really spend more money in another position. Or if you have somehow money in the bank, you can simply go for Salah as well. But for now, I would actually be much more fond of actually going for a Diaby move. The reason why I would do that is because a lot of midfielders who are still taking this sort of punt on midfielders like Foden, like Arsenal midfielders, can still sort of hold on to that asset until game week 4. So if you own a Havertz and you think he looked terrible, which he did, and you own someone like Odegaard who wasn't particularly involved when it comes to goal scoring chances in the game, I would still keep these assets until game week 4. I still have quite a bit of confidence because Jesus is still out, for example, for Havertz owners, and Odegaard we know is absolutely nailed for us to keep them. As far as KDB owners, though, you probably still have to exercise a move, and the only midfielder who has a really good Game Week 2 game is someone like Diaby. However, you could obviously think, maybe someone like Havertz in that situation, you're really upset with him and you really want to exercise the transfer out. I think in this case, you can still go for a Spurs midfielder because they're clearly the ones that we're probably paying the most attention to given the Harry Kane transfer change. And at this situation, I would probably just immediately think about Maddison. He already had a great game. He's on all sorts of set pieces. We still don't really know who's going to be the penalty taker because we expected actually that the captaincy change might be to Maddison. And I think, as previously reported, we really don't know about the penalty situation. Son became the captain, and it's very likely that he could be the penalty taker as well. But even Richarlison has a good shot of being a penalty taker too because of his record. So I would still keep an open mind towards Richarlison because maybe the money in the bank could be something that could be very crucial to you for a future transfer. So have a think about that too. I would not dismiss Richarlison because he had a bad game versus Brentford. Right now, Spurs just don't have someone replacing his minutes. And so you could clearly see that Richarlison with 90 minutes is still going to be a effective asset after the Brentford game. And so, in my opinion, I would say I would still prefer Diaby if you're looking for a Game Week 2 transfer just to attack that, and then actually think about Maddison, then Richarlison. Maddison, as I said, is someone who's on all sorts of set pieces, a very creative player, not someone that we usually have at this price point because Odegaard and Bruno Fernandes or even KDB, your sort of typical creators, I suppose, are not at the sort of price point. So Maddison clearly is a gem in this FPL position. And so I would think about going for Maddison if you wanted to go earliest for Game Week 3. But of course, that's an overlapping good fixture with Arsenal as well. You probably want to see the Arsenal punt out in Game Week 3. And so that's why I would still wait for Game Week 4 to exercise that move. In the meantime, of course, you can find other ways to sort of loosen up your budget so you can afford a Maddison in the future or just go for someone like Richarlison, as I said. But that's going to be the Game Week 2 preview. If you have any other pressing questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'd be very open to sort of answering that question. In terms of general sort of transfer targets that I have and that I think other people will have in the future if they don't already have these picks already, I think clearly Nicholas Jackson on Game Week 3 is going to be very, very interesting. João Pedro, I would say, is probably someone that you don't need to go for if you already started with players like Watkins or Jackson instead. I wouldn't necessarily see the need to go straight to João Pedro. Ultimately, a lot of those picks, such as Watkins and Jackson, are still amazing, and there's really no need to actually move away from them that immediately. Julian Alvarez, however, is one who actually benefited a lot from the KDB injury. And if you're someone who actually went with the Foden punt, I would also keep him too, because ultimately the KDB injury benefits both Julian Alvarez and Foden just in terms of the minutes that they can actually cover up within the City team, now that Mahrez, of course, is out of the team as well. So that's a huge benefit from the KDB injury, and I would definitely keep an open mind towards maybe going for Julian Alvarez as well in Game Week 3. But it's not necessarily a Game Week 2 transfer I would think about because Newcastle, even though it's still at home at the Etihad, isn't particularly a transfer window that I'll be looking forward to get an attacker in. But that's going to be my thoughts for Game Week 2. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.